Hello and welcome to another workflow walkthrough. My name is Frank Walsh and I make these videos to show you my post-processing on digital and film images, generally using Darktable, sometimes some other tools. And the whole purpose is just to show you what I do and how I use the tools. And maybe it'll give you some ideas of how the tools can be used on your own images. I don't intend these to be in-depth tutorials on how a specific tool works. There's lots of other excellent videos out there that'll show you that. I would definitely recommend looking at Bruce Williams' videos if you want to know exactly how some of the tools work. But for me, I'm just sort of going start to finish, pulling everything together and trying to give you some hints and tips along the way. So I hope you find that useful. So today I am going to process a couple of images quickly, but I also want to spend some more time talking about groups, the duplicate manager, and how to manage duplicate images or images that are close to duplicates. So, Darktable is pretty smart about this. A lot of times it will actually group images together that are shot in a burst, but not always. So you can go ahead and choose to group them manually. It will also automatically group images when you use the duplicate manager because then it knows that they're a duplicate. And you know that an image is grouped if you see this little symbol here. You see where my mouse is, there's this little circle with 4 dots in it. And that means that that is a group. Oh, sorry for the scrolling. So this tells me, and if I click here, and I should get a little tooltip, and it says there's 2 grouped images. And if I click on that, it'll expand that group. So I can see that I have a black and white version of the image and I have a color version of the image. And if I click on the grouped images again, whichever one I click on is going to become the front image. That's going to be the one that shows up. And then if I go ahead and collapse grouped images, we'll see that the color image is now the front image the black and white image is now the image that shows up front. And if I click this again, or I click up here and expand grouped images, I'll see the two grouped images. And okay, so that's how you can use grouped images from here. Now if I go ahead and click on this one again while I'm grouped, and then I collapse my images, now the color image is in front. So that's how you pick which image you want to be the one that appears when Darktable is in its collapsed images view. So which one, I guess you would say, is your main image. So here I have some film images that I shot earlier in the day, and the film images are all individual scans, so Darktable doesn't do anything to try to automatically group these images. But I was shooting bracketed images, so I have images that are very similar. They're basically the exact same composition but slightly different exposures. So really I don't need to see all those images when I'm going through my my catalog. So if I wanted to group them, that's pretty simple. I click on one image and then I control click on another image that's part of the same group, same composition, and I come over here to the sidebar and I select group. And it says add selected images to expanded group or create a new one. And I could also use Shift G. But I'm going to go ahead and click that. And now we see that the little magic group symbol appears on both of these. This is what I want to be my lead image in the group, so I'll click on it. And now if I expand my group and collapse my group, I see that that's the image at front. I can do the same thing with these 2 images. These are also the same composition. Click group, click the key image, and it collapses and shows me just the key image. So that's how you can use grouping in Darktable to clean up your light table a little bit so that you don't see lots of images that you maybe shot in a burst. And you can always access all the images by simply clicking on the grouped images icon on the image, and it will expand that group. If you want to expand all the groups, you can use this up here. And if I click it once, it collapses all the group. If I click it again, it expands all the groups. So that's a little bit about how grouped images work in Lighttable. Now I'm going to process this image and we'll talk about creating duplicates and then how Darktable will automatically put those duplicates in a group. So I'm going to go into the color image here. We've had some really nice fog lately in the area, as we're moving into winter, but we get some slightly warmer days. It's really conducive to fog, and the forest in the fog is a pretty irresistible place for me. It gives you a chance to separate objects in your composition that you wouldn't normally be able to separate, and you would have these cluttered, messy backgrounds. In this case, this is a simple vine on the forest floor that has just a beautiful curved shape. And normally this would get lost with the trees in the background, but the fog really gives it a great separation. I shot a couple different versions of this, and in this version I chose to focus on this area of the image here and allow the curve of the vine to just sort of become an abstraction, make a nice infinity symbol in my image there. And I really liked the way this little briar bush stood out in pretty stark relief in the foreground, happened to fall right in the plane of focus where I was on the limb here. So I have these nice brightly focused berries, a little cobweb between them with some dewdrops on it. It's a kitschy image, but I really like it. It has a nice calming feel, and I made a couple of different versions of this. And you can see over here in my history stack some of the steps that I applied, which really wasn't very much. Everything that you look at up here to Filmic RGB is automatically applied when I import my images, digital images. It's automatically applied, but I did, of course, change some of the settings, and then I played with the Contrast Equalizer and the vignetting. So, let's take a look at the duplicate manager down below here. I have it expanded. If I didn't have it expanded, my sidebar would look like this. And your sidebar probably would typically look like this. You wouldn't see the duplicate manager expanded. If I go into the duplicate manager, I see existing duplicates, right? So the one that I'm on and a black and white version. And if I want to make new duplicates, like I want to show you how to create this image here on the left, I can come over here to create a duplicate, and it says creates a duplicate of the image with the same history stack. So that's going to give me all the same steps. Or here I say create a virgin duplicate of the image without any development. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And that's going to create a new version of the image, and it said without any development, but that's not entirely true, right? Because the way my defaults are set up, new images that come into Darktable I have the scene referred option set in my settings. We'll take a look at where that is very quickly. But that means that it automatically comes in with Filmic RGB and exposure set at the default levels, which obviously you can see in this image I adjusted those, but we'll take a look at that. First, let's look at where that setting is. I've shown it on previous videos, but we might as well look at it again here today. I'm going to come here to the Processing tab, and in the Processing tab I have Auto Apply Pixel Workflow Default set to Scene Referred. Now your options here are Scene Referred, which applies Filmic and exposure. There's Display Referred, which uses the base curve, and there's none, right? So if I click on this, I have Scene Referred, Display Referred, and none. So since I have Scene Referred, that's why we automatically got exposure and Filmic RGB applied. Now Filmic RGB automatically applies a half stop of exposure compensation to images, but I have found that with my camera, you can see that even a half a stop gives me a pretty underexposed image. So I usually find it's about a stop. So I just enter a stop here, and that looks about right. I could go a little bit higher. 1 1/3 stops. And there we go. I have a brighter overall image, and then I can work from this middle gray position in a little bit better way. So now that I have the exposure where I want it, I'm going to come into Filmic, and the curve looks pretty good. I don't really need to adjust the defaults here as far as where the white and black relative exposure points are. I feel pretty good about that. This is a foggy image. So I don't need it to be super high contrast. That's not the point of a fog image, at least for me. But I'm going to go into the Look tab, and for the color image, I'm going to go ahead and pull the saturation up just a little bit, not too much, and maybe just add a little bit of contrast here again, but not too much. All right, now I'm going to go into the Contrast Equalizer, where I will get the sharpness and where I want it to be in the areas that I want it to be. So I'm going to turn on the Contrast Equalizer, and I'm going to come up here to the small end of the scale because I want to bring out detail in this limb here. Let's zoom in here so we can take a look at the effect of this. It's already a pretty sharp image, has some nice detail. But if I pull up on this end of the curve, we can see, it might be difficult to see in the video, but we can see how that pops. If I turn it off and I turn it back on. And the nice thing about Contrast Equalizer giving me this control is it hasn't really affected any of the sharpness down here in the leaves or any of the, what I'll say, larger feature areas of the image are. So if I turn it off and I turn it on, we really don't see the leaves changing, but what we do see is things like this cobweb and the berry. If I turn it off, you know, that cobweb loses some contrast with the background, the berry loses its edge a little bit. If I turn it back on, those things tend to pop out a little bit more. Now, you know, compare that to local contrast. A lot of people use local contrast for sharpening. So let's take a look at that. If I go up here now and I turn on local contrast, see, you can immediately see the impact that it has on the background. The local contrast module makes all of these shadowed trees, or these fog shrouded trees in the background, pop out relative to the foreground. So those get darker, the background gets lighter, and the overall image tends to look a little punchier. Now that is a very good thing in a lot of cases, but in an image like this, it's all about the mood and the softness, and to me, local contrast being off looks far better than local contrast being on, and with the Contrast Equalizer, I'm able to apply the sharpness to the areas that I want, the fine details. So that's getting a little bit more in depth into Contrast Equalizer and why I use that. But I just wanted to quickly demonstrate the difference, because local contrast does allow you to separate between highlights and shadows and set your midtone range, but it doesn't do anything as far as feature size. Now I want to come back here to the Contrast Equalizer, because I actually want to take larger features and pull them down a little bit and reduce the contrast of those areas a little bit. So that allows me to create even more blur in the larger areas of the image while preserving the sharpness in the fine details, and that gives me even more separation of my foreground and background. So now if we turn Contrast Equalizer off, we can see how the contrast between this dark vine and the light background has increased. But if I turn it on, because I pulled down that large object, that's fading away even more into the background. And if I've gone a little too far, you know, I don't have to change the shape of my curve. I can just dial back the effect a little bit if I want to. And the only other thing I'm going to do on this image is I got a little bit of the edge of a tree here that bothers me because it almost looks like a vignette, but it looks like a light leak on a film camera, or a reverse light leak on a film camera. So I'm going to come into crop and rotate. I'm going to set this to the original image size, and I'm just going to crop in a little bit so that I lose that false vignette on the side of the image. Good, I feel pretty good about that. Let's take a look at the reference image, the one that I processed previously. So to do that over here in the duplicate manager, I can just double click on it and it'll pop up. And here I didn't crop that out. But let's take a look at these two in comparison, right? So the way we can do that's pretty easy. I'm going to take a snapshot of this image, and then I'm going to come to the image that we just worked on, and I'm going to view them in comparison. So the image on the left is the image that I processed earlier, and the image on the right is the one that I just processed now. And yeah, I made some different choices in my processing, not too much different, but slightly different. And I'm happy with both of those. Now, I wanted to quickly show you what happens now in the light table. So now we have 3 duplicates here. So let's jump back out to the light table. Now in the light table, you see that the grouped images are expanded, so we see all 3 of these here. And if I hover over my symbol, it says 3 grouped images. So it's automatically added them to a group. And if I come here and collapse all my groups in the light table, I'll see the grouped image symbol, and I have 3 grouped image, and then the current image and a version 1 and a version 2. So let's go back into the dark room, and let's make one more of this, and let's make a black and white version. And we'll go ahead and we'll start with the version that we just processed. So I want to keep all that processing I did with sharpness. I don't want to have to do all that again. So the way for me to do that is to use this icon, which is create a duplicate of the image using the same history stack. So we'll do that. All right, now we've created another version, version 3. So we have the original, which is version 0, a version 1, a version 2, and now version 3. And version 3 is going to be pretty simple. I'm going to come in here to the channel mixer, and I'm going to take a look at the presets. Now I'm looking at the colors in this image. There's not much, right? There's oranges and there's a little bit of green, and everything else is already pretty well desaturated. So I'm thinking that, really the difference I'm going to see is probably going to be something. Yellow filters are going to do something with my leaves and my foreground, or orange filters, and a green filter is not going to do much with those, but it's going to maybe change some of these little pops of green. Let's take a look at the green filter. So now in the green filter, I've almost lost those pops of green entirely, right? They've blended into the background almost completely, which isn't bad. I don't necessarily need that additional contrast there, but let's take a look at what happens if I use yellow filter preset. Not very much, not much difference. Orange filter preset. Yeah, none of these are doing a whole lot more. The orange filter and the yellow filter are lighter than the green filter. If we go back to green, we can see that it's a fair bit darker. It's darkened the contrast between the background and the foreground in this area, which is where some of that green was. So let's take a look at orange again. And I think that orange is going to be the place that I want to start here. So orange is the place that I want to start. Now this image lacks overall contrast. We've converted it to black and white. We've gotten rid of some of the color contrast that was in the original image, and really we probably need to put that back, right? So if I got rid of that other snapshot. So we want to put some of that back, but now we really want to focus on black and white contrast. So let's look at the RGB curve module. And in the RGB curve module, I'll start out by making sure I have some pure black in my image, or close to pure black. And then I'm going to pull up on the whites, because a fog image should have kind of a slightly brighter feel, in my opinion. And then I'm going to pull down a little bit here in the shadow area or in the midtones, and just create a little bit of an S-curve. Too much. A little bit of an S-curve, reintroduce some tonal contrast into the image, and I feel pretty good about that. And I really like, with the black and white image, I really like the texture in the wood here, how it looks. And I can probably stand, since it is black and white, and it doesn't really matter too much if I start to get a little crunchy, I can come into the Contrast Equalizer and pull this effect up farther. Yeah, that's pretty good. Starts to look a little grainy because we're The noise is also fine detail, so we're bringing out the noise in the image. But in a black and white image, noise has a tendency to look an awful lot like film grain, and that's not a bad thing. Happy with that. I think the last thing I'm going to do with the black and white image is I'm actually going to add a little bit of a vignette. I think it'll help us here. So I'll go to the effects group, put on a vignette. That's a little much. So let's turn that brightness up a little bit. Just a slight bit of darkening around the edges. Vignette off, vignette on, and let's call that done. So now we have 4 duplicates. We'll come back out here to our to our light table, and we'll see that. But while we're here in darkroom, we can navigate between those duplicates very easily. If I click on the previous black and white version that I made and take a snapshot of that, now I can come back to the black and white version that I just made, and let's add that snapshot. And see, there's very slight differences in these 2 images, but overall pretty similar. I think I went a little bit lighter on the later one, and I'm okay with that. I think that was a good decision. And now on the light table, we see that this grouped image, and you can see it might be a little bit hard to see, but Darktable puts an orange frame around all the images that are in the group. So if I say, go back and say I want this to be my keyframe, I click on that, I collapse the group, and there's the group collapsed. And again, 4 images. So we can expand and collapse our groups here. We can look at our grouped images when we're in the darkroom, and we can expand individual groups, or we can use this little universal guy up here, which will expand and contract all of the groups in the current collection that we have shown. So I hope that was useful. I know there was a couple of people that had asked for a little bit more information on the duplicate manager, so we looked at those 2 options in the duplicate manager to create a virgin duplicate or to create a duplicate that has all of the processing the same as what you've already done. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a comment if you'd like to see something else done in a future video. Bye-bye.